For many of you, that may be the first moment of silence you've had all day. Thank you for taking it here with me as we begin the process of thinking about and talking about the transformative power of authentic listening. Today, I will be sharing with you from Levine Museum of the New South, one of our key practices to help unite community voice with actual practice in the arts and culture sector. So as I walk you through this, I'll be sharing some stories with you, and I certainly, you're gonna have to participate with me by eye rolling and winking because we can't interact this way until later. But I wanna share with you, I wanna start with you just one story. And I wanna start with this image. So this image was actually part of an exhibit that we hosted for Who is the We and We the People? It was a part of Fighting for Democracy. And I want to read to you what the young lady who wrote it said. She said, "I feel the weight upon my shoulders. I feel the world is getting colder. I have no voice. I listen but have no choice. Let us unite, not as a city, nor as a country, but rather as a world, to promote respect, justice, and dignity for all, and overall hope for a better tomorrow." Her name was Jennifer Villafranco. And when asked, "Jennifer, this is a self-portrait. Why did you put yourself behind an umbrella?" She said, "I'm an undocumented student. I am often invisible, and no one hears me. So when I did my self-portrait, I chose to put myself the way I'm most seen." Jennifer feels that she doesn't have a voice. And she's not the only one in Charlotte. There's many people in our community. And it's a community that is growing and changing very rapidly. And there's many people who feel like they have no voice and that they aren't heard. So that kind of brings me to me. As I said, I'm Janeen Bryant, and yeah, I went to school near Charlotte. 13 years ago, I came to the community. And when I came, I was a part of the change, because indeed, times are changing in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in the whole South. So I'm a part of that change. I am the first person actually to graduate from my family from college. My twin sister graduated the next day, but but I'm the first one to graduate from college, and I was a part of the change for Charlotte because I actually came back and worked in the community in which I had been learning in, and then several years later, in 2006, my daughter was born. Now, if you're in Charlotte for long enough and you ask people to raise their hand, a group of people just like you all, and you ask people to raise their hand if they are native-born Charlotteans, I might get 2 hands in here. It's just not common that you have native-born Charlotteans because most of the people in Charlotte are newcomers. But my daughter, she's a native-born Charlottean. She ties me to the community in a way that I'd never been tied before. We are part of the big demographic shift happening in Charlotte. And our voices matter, just like Jennifer's. So here's a map that was part of part of an exhibit called Changing Places that we hosted many years ago. But this is from many years ago, and indeed, we actually just reached 1 million people. We noted it in our Observer in September. But we anticipate that Charlotte will continue to grow and grow and grow. It's not a community that actually slowed its demographic change and shift. And so that community change actually looks really a lot different than what has happened in the past. Before, people might think of North Carolina or the South in general as a black and white landscape. But here we are saying, actually, the changes, the newcomers that are coming here, are really from Florida or Germany or France or New York. Many of them are Latino, and we wanted to pay attention to the kinds of changes that were happening in our community. It was noted that, well, in the Center for the Future of Museums, they had a publication, and they said that museums will become increasingly irrelevant as the U.S. becomes majority minority. So by approximately 2025, we'll have no clear majority in the United States. So Charlotte is an example of what that looks like. It's a community is growing, the demographics are shifting. What does that mean for us? And here's where I'd like for you all to think about something. We have an opportunity to use this as a really pivotal moment in our practice. We have an opportunity to ask, seek, and listen. This is the power of using transformative, authentic listening in your actions, and look at those themes, use them to guide your practice. What does this mean? Well, if you have the connection, if you think about that 1 in 10 core museum visitors is a person of color. And by 2025, our institutions will be embedded in a country that is majority minority. That's an alarming disconnect. Something has to be done about that, because that means that the people of color who are populating our communities and coming and joining and making it a thriving, relevant place are not the same people coming through the arts and sector doors. How do we bridge that? So I say, we ask, seek, and listen, and we let that drive our actions. We're propelled by a belief at Levine Museum that museums can bring relevance to this topic, and that museums can bring relevance to the community if we first ask. So this first example is driven by the questions that we decide to ask. Like I mentioned, in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's a big demographic change. One of those demographic change is the increase in Latinos. It's a 600% hypergrowth in our community. Hypergrowth in this way means that there's a 600% increase in the last 20 years for that population demographic. What are we doing about it as a community? What kinds of questions are we asking to meet the needs of this population? This young man is holding a sign that he and his mother wrote. And when we ask the question, we were at a community festival, and when we asked the question, his sign basically says why it's relevant to talk about immigration and the changes that are happening in our community. He says, because we are people too and deserve to be equal, be treated equally. So in thinking about that, we went out and conducted some listening sessions, and we learned some things. And one of the key things we learned was that Latinos are from all over. And in fact, it's a construct, and we have to learn to talk about it as a construct. I'm going to go into that more in just a minute, but I wanted to touch base on that because one of the things we heard some dissatisfaction around from one of our Puerto Rican participants was one of the questions that she hears so often is, so where in Mexico is Puerto Rico? So that first thing we do is to ask, what's the trend in our community? For this one, the trend, the example I gave is that it's Latinization, 600% hypergrowth. We need to listen. We need to seek. The next one, we got to seek who are we going to talk to? Who needs to be in that room to make this process go further? I'm going to give you a different example. We were hosting the exhibit Without Sanctuary. Some of you may be familiar with this exhibit. Without Sanctuary is an exhibit that is primarily consisting of photography of lynching victims. In it, most of the victims are African American. They are between the ages of about 16 to 35. In this exhibit, it's very hard to think as an institution how we're going to present this in a way that highlights and shares what we truly wanted our community to get from this. First of all, they had to come. But we thought to ourselves, who do we need to seek to help us understand how to make this exhibit relevant to what was happening? We sought two groups, primarily made up of men. One group was all African American men. Actually, two groups were all African American men. Those were the people who, in the pictures, were primarily seen as victims. One group was all white men. We asked them very similar questions in their listening sessions, and they were able to share with us their authentic feelings. One man said to us, I really hope that the victim's voice is empowered. I don't want just the historical background of the victim. I want to hear their voices. This was from one of our white participants. We knew that it was very important for us to help shape and share this story. So that's an example from Without Sanctuary. Well, here's another example from where we listen. Authentic listening really does offer you a transformative experience in your community if you go in understanding that it's the basis of a relationship. It should be fundamental to have listening at the core of your processes. So as we listened in the community, these are some of the activities that we actually did. The top corner you see there is our traditional listening session. We host it in the museum in our space. But next, you'll notice that all of the other pictures seem not to be within our four walls. That's because we decided to go in places and spaces where people felt safe and felt like they could share their story with us. So here you see us at the radio station where we actually asked some of the same questions that we asked in-house in the radio station on air live. Here you see us at, I think we're at a bank in the top corner, and in the bottom we're at a tienda, at a grocery store, and we actually did some shopping while we were there. I mean, dual purposes. So I'm sharing this with you because we are asking, we're seeking, and listening. And we heard things like, Levine has a great responsibility to educate our community, letting them know we also make history. They need to get to know us so they can accept us. I could have used this quote from any of the sessions, but we actually heard this as a result of our Latino listening sessions. But this is, the responsibility and the onus is on the museum. We have to take responsibility and we have to take accountability, which is actually why so many of us don't choose to listen in the first place, I would argue. So again, ask, seek, listening. Let the themes that emerge from your listening, when you gather that information and you're talking to all those people, let those themes guide your practice. Let those themes guide your actions. And you will find some really good benefits, like authentic connection to audience, responsive relationship, alignment with the community that you're in, stretching your staff capacity. Your staff will not like you for this. But you will indeed stretch your staff capacity. These are some of the great benefits. Now, there are some critiques to this. You are opening your doors to hearing some people respond critically of your institution. You are going to have people respond negatively to some of the things you put out there. You're going to have to be prepared for that. But I want to share some of the ways this might help you, because it can move you from isolation to belonging when your voice is heard in the museum, when my voice is heard in the museum, when Jennifer's voice is heard in the museum. Ooh. It can move you from division to connection. It can move you from suspicion to trust, because we are sharing stories and we use those stories to generate the content and the relevance that we need to see the different kinds of people, our non-traditional museum goers, come into our institutions. You might be asking, so Janeen, what does this look like? Well, it looks like this. Here's a panel that we had. That's a rabbi at the top, a scholar on Muslim culture in the middle, and a minister at the end. It looks like this. Our exhibit is a catalyst for dialogue and engagement in our community. People from all over feel invested in what we do because we asked them before we did it. It looks like this. Youth come to us because they feel comfortable sharing their stories. And hopefully you get a thumbs up that you're doing it right. And ultimately, some of those same youth that came to us earlier will come back and intern for us. It looks like this, large-scale programming in which we ask questions and listen carefully to what people say. It looks like this, where community members tell us they want joy, hope, remembrance, love, and to cherish each other in the community. It looks like this and feels like this. Listening can be your innovation. The closest thing I can say to you is that it should feel like you're listening to the heartbeat of your community.